I just turned 29, and I have a few questions. Like, what does it mean to become a man? What is the archetype of the masculine? How does purpose relate to this? Will my mind, like my body, become less pliant and able to change as I grow older? And what about my childhood? Is this really goodbye? Recently, I had a lot of time to think about these questions. I spent the better part of a week Nordic skiing in the 100-mile wilderness of Maine. On this multi-day trek, myself, Justine, and two of our friends traversed this beautiful land, completely off the grid, far away from civilization, spending our nights in historic cabins along the route. Our only source of warmth was the crackle and pop of a fire, and aside from the heavens, our only source of light was the soft glow of a propane mantle. Our days consisted of crossing a variety of terrain and weather, including the coldest temperature the region had felt in the past 40 years. But upon arriving at the next checkpoint along the way, we could always find comfort by cozying up to the stove, having a snack, and reliving the day's adventure. Each camp also had a main lodge with communal dining, where travelers could come together and share stories over a hearty, home-cooked meal. This was much appreciated, because after heading back to the cabin, planning tomorrow's route, and resting our weary bones, it was time to rise with the sun and do it all over again. After a few repetitions, the methodical glide of skis back and forth allows one to drift into an almost meditative-like state. And so, I found myself thinking of those questions I mentioned earlier. As I approach 30 years old, does that mean a new stage of life is upon me? Is there something I'm quote-unquote supposed to be doing? At what point do you stop being a boy and start being a man? Does the boy truly ever die? Or can an inner child live forever?
I think I pressed a button. I'm recording.
Furthermore, what archetypal qualities are we referring to when we speak of masculinity? The desire to answer this question has only increased knowing I now have another being to care for, waiting for me when I return home from this journey. Moreover, while it might be easier to disregard this inquiry altogether, I feel as though the answer is tied very closely to the notion of purpose, and from which I may derive a great source of meaning in my life over the next decades to come. But the truth is, while I do sometimes feel as though I embody the maturation of the archetypal masculine, and that I've embraced adulthood hand in hand, just as often, I don't. The definition seems to morph and twist away from me just as I'm about to grasp it. And the concepts I've met, whether that be figures in my life or characters in a story, appear so varied to me, or at least now they do. In my younger years, growing up in a small town, the definition of an adult or a man was much more homogeneous. And so too was the perception of purpose and the stages of life one should progress through. But this homogeneity was confusing to me, because just as I could strike my fist against my opponent in mixed martial arts and feel the thrill of battle drum inside my heart, I would no less enjoy a solitary evening, writing stories or drawing imagery of fantasy worlds, a hobby which I was quite shy and sensitive about. There I was, perceiving myself to carry this juxtaposition inside my soul. On the one hand, the calluses of a farmer, strong, unwavering, and providing, and on the other, smooth lines, subtle and delicate, with a presence that flows like the evening breeze. It wasn't until recently that I realized this was not a juxtaposition, but rather a symbiotic coexistence, which I now embrace with fondness. For as one classic text suggests, perhaps there is a king, a warrior, a magician, and a lover within us all. So then, what decides when I've crossed the threshold of manhood, or which social customs I should engage with? Is it age? Is it culture? Is it my responsibilities, possessions, achievements? Or is it me? I suppose the answer may be all of the above. But from my point of view, this threshold does not appear to be crossed without tribulation. Not only do I fear losing the sense of wonder and imagination innate to a child, I also fear the grooves of my mind will become increasingly deep and rigid. The same thought patterns will occur again and again until my ability to change my mind or evolve my identity will diminish. Michael Pollan writes about a structure in the brain called the default mode network, essentially our autopilot operating system. This structure becomes stronger with age. Just as they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, humans tend to fare no better. Our mind stops communicating with itself in the way it used to, and instead creates inner echo chambers where dissenting voices are silenced. I fear the inevitability of this and the unwarranted sureties so often found inside the mind of a father. I fear responding to the question of a curious child by saying, "That's just what you do." I fear the pressures of society to follow the progression of life stage milestones because that's just what you do. I fear that this is, unconsciously, what we commonly associate with the successful ascension into adulthood. But then again, did Socrates himself not supposedly say he knew nothing? If our opinions and identities become more ingrained over time, is that a matter of wisdom or a lack thereof? If we cannot explain something in simple terms to a child, is that a matter of time constraint or a lack of critical thought? If we follow the beaten path and forgo the less trodden, is that a matter of duty and responsibility or a lack of courage? It seems to me many of the hallmarks of so-called maturity encourage the very qualities that are antithetical to maturation itself. So, maybe I'm wrong in thinking this way, but with each circuit around the sun, I'd like to be less sure of myself and more patient. I'd like to be less compliant and more undaunted. I'd like to be as Michelangelo's David, all that's left from a block of marble, where everything I'm not makes me everything I am. Maybe then I can call myself a man.